Hey, what's up, everybody? JB here from Soccer Dad Pod. It is awfully early in the daytime at the time of this recording for a Soccer Dad Pod. We typically prefer the happy hour time frame so that we can artificially inflate our quality with the assistance of beer and whiskey. But at this time of day, we've limited it to I'm on my second cup of coffee, not nearly enough, but I guarantee we'll be striking irons hot on this one. You know the deal. When we bring on guests that have English accents, numbers tend to go up. I hope the same occurs. A little bit of a happy trend, believability, whatever we want to say. We'll bring these guys on in just a little bit. You've already read your dashboard. You know who I've got here, but you'll learn a lot more about them, the platform, the shows, soccer, a little bit of competition with other networks, etc. And I'm sure there'll be a fair amount of trash talk, East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, and beyond. I want to give you a quick recap, regroup. Last episode, we had a blast. We had our good friend, St. Louis alum, Mr. Kevin Robeson, the associate head coach from Indiana, who is the gaffer for TST's own Who's Your Army, third year in the tournament. We had a couple alum, ex-pros that all went to Kelly Business School. You know, that little place that Mark Cuban kind of popped out of. They're pretty good there at Indiana in generating some high-power business people. These guys are no different. And we talked about, imagine this, soccer, $77 million tournament, playing Pat McAfee, playing Nanny. I called him Nanny. That's all right. I'm not a United fan anyway. Nani. At all. Really cool episode. And we even slid in there because Zach joined me, and given our kids' lives at this point and what we're living through the recruiting process, etc., we were able to talk to these guys. I mean, when you think of blue blood schools in U.S. soccer, when you think of NCAA Division I powerhouses, there's only 2, 3, 4 maybe that pop to mind by anybody, and Indiana University is absolutely near the top of the list. So hearing from those guys what it takes, what it took, what they looked for, what culture meant, it was really phenomenal conversation. So if you got a little guy that's in the process, and actually one of our guests today, he might chime in on this in a little bit, but if you got somebody in the process, great episode to not only learn more about TST, which is arguably the hottest thing in U.S. soccer right now from a brand popularity standpoint. The $1 million doesn't hurt, but you'll learn about that. And then you'll get a little bit insight into the Hoosier legacy, what Coach Jerry and Todd have created over there, the Yeagleys here in the Midwest. So do that. And by the way, numbers keep going up. For some reason, you guys keep listening and keep kind of turning on friends and family members, maybe neighbors, maybe enemies. Maybe you just want to really bore them. So you're like, here, listen to these guys. And then they leave you alone because they think you're crazy. Whatever the reason is, we appreciate the support. But if you could just take a second, hit the subscribe if you haven't already. More importantly, drop a review. And I've said this before. I'm very self-deprecating on purpose. I don't know. It just comes naturally. I like the bad reviews. I prefer good reviews. But if you just want me to shut up and drop a 1-star and give me a reason why, do it. Because I'm going to read it on air. I'm kind of like that Yelper. I like reading those 1 and 2 stars, So bring it my way. Really appreciate it. So with all that being said, we're going to get our work day started. We're going to get this episode rolling. Joining me today, one is, I believe, down in Austin at the time of this recording, and the other one is up in the Bay Area. I've got 2 guys that are from the Hooligan Soccer Network who host the Hooligan Soccer podcast, who are throwing together just a massive conglomerate of soccer info, news, content, built on the backs of a lot of podcasts and writers, etc. Joining me, the Hooligan on the West Coast and Mr. Gary Stryker down there in the Longhorn State. How you doing, gentlemen?
Doing well. Thank you, JP. Thanks for having us on.
Go ahead.
I must speak with my Dutch accent. If accents really perform well on your podcast, I'll be Dutch today.
I think you said English accents. You didn't mention any other accents.
I absolutely. I meant because the Dutch.
Okay.
The Dutch accent.
I'll go back I'll go back to Yankee then.
Yeah,
That's
Dutch
fine.
accents just are like they're trigger warnings. Like, for those of us that have been to Europe, it's like, oh my God, I've been to the red light. I don't want to go back. I can't go back. So,
yeah,
cute.
they can be a bit weird.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thanks for joining me. I know we've we've been working on the back end, kind of working together and growing not only the new network, helping promote not only our show but other shows, really putting a new thumbprint into the soccer DNA of America from a content perspective. So number one, thank you for finding us. Which let's just start there. I'm really curious because obviously, soccer is by every standard, every metric, and every kind of eyeball test is is the fastest growing sport in America, not only at the youth level. It's always been big, but it's getting bigger. But it's growing in the major metro markets due to obviously it always being there, largely on the back of immigrant populations, immigrant neighborhoods. Like here in St. Louis, we had the Hill with all the Italians, which produced 6 players of that infamously famous for you, Mr. Gary Stryker, 1950 1-0 victory over those other guys on the other side of the pond. So I wanted to kind of better understand how'd you guys find us, because obviously to build a network of podcasts all across the country with a lot of different kind of subject matter, to land on St. Louis made sense. We're a soccer city, but talk a little bit about the introduction to Soccer Dad Pod and maybe why you kicking off the network.
Yeah, well, no, thanks for that, JB. I think to answer that question, I think the way we found you was quite simply, obviously, just a standard search on Spotify, right? I, obviously, being a dad of 3 and coaching 2 junior teams, obviously, I'm a little bit sort of earlier in the cycle compared to where you 2 guys are. It's always fascinated me to understand, like, again, there is this sort of subculture, isn't there, about sort of like sports dads, soccer moms. I know how it is, and obviously having been sort of in now for the last probably 2, 3, 4 years, as it were, I was just sort of Googling it and checking it out, and then obviously did a search on Spotify, and that's how I came across you. And obviously when I saw Soccer Dad Pod, that for me is ding, 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 lights up. The only downside is I feel as though you're limiting yourself somewhat to the St. Louis area, because I think it's a nationwide and even a global phenomenon that is happening. And I see it every Saturday. All of these dads, we all go for some beers at the end of every season, and we will coaching our various teams and different sort of, men's, boys, girls, sort of mixed and kinder and those kind of things, because I'm at that age. And it is a sort of like a whole subculture, and we all sort of enjoy it, and it's a great. I love it for a number of reasons, right? One, it gets you out of the house, gets you out sort of there, but I love it because then you can actually engage with your kids, and then at the same time as well, see the kids' friends and understand their personalities and characters, and you get to see them as well. So that's a very long-winded way of saying that, I've suddenly become a soccer dad, and obviously I came across your pod, and obviously we started the Hooligan Soccer vertical, and obviously sort of we had a wonderful convergence of incentives and opportunity.
Well, it was funny because early in the process, whenever you reached out, I mean, I'll be honest, I think it was the second email that I actually replied to, because, here in 2025, if you don't know the email, you really don't want to read it. Just human nature, especially when it was like Hooligan Soccer, like, oh my God, okay, so this come from Dubai, but I read it, checked it out, we jumped on, and then immediately you're in Austin, you have an English accent, which, on the spot, I'm like, yeah, we're in. Okay, whatever. We were part of this Premier League thing, and
we're both Chelsea fans as well, JB, as well.
Yeah,
so that's something, yeah.
Yeah, that's why I was like, just give them whatever they want, talking. It was really kind of funny because then I started, we were talking about, you brought it up, well, let me back up just a little bit, and a lot of our listeners have heard this. We started Soccer Dad Pod to kill time. I mean, that was like, if we were to list what were the reasons. Number one, because me and my co-hosts were always at soccer fields, whether it's training, 3, 4, 5 nights a week, or games, or tournaments, or trips. All you do, as you guys well know, you stand around and you pontificate and you create theories as to lineups and why and all this other shit. And so I'm like, well, this is gold, and we're quote smart. Let's start a pod, and I had the gear. And to your point, the St. Louis kind of vertical, it was really easy for us because here in St. Louis, the reality is, I mean, you walk into any building anywhere or any field, et cetera, you're going to find somebody that played at an extremely high level, whether they're pro, national team, they're going to be a legend in some form from high school all the way up to the top. So it was easy for us to kind of build the conversations. But to your point, it was really a beta. We figured if it could work and we could kind of dip and dodge between the Mike Sorbers of the world, who were MVPs at the World Cup for the national team, all the way down to Sally Soccer Mom, and her stories are engaging. We knew that would work in other markets, which was one of the reasons why I was really interested in joining the network, because I think that we've created a model that is wash, rinse, repeat in any other zip code. Which brings me to you, Q. To put a little pin in the map for the listeners here, your market, as Gary mentioned a second ago, you two have little/big guys that are kind of in the pipeline of the system. Talk a little bit about your geography, your own personal relationship to the game, and the network.
Sure. So you're right. I have a rising senior who is in the midst of the college application process right now, and this is an interesting fun fact for all those listening. JB's son and my son have actually played against each other in a competitive match, which we realized on our email introductions to each other. I went, so anyway, so that is one of those great ironies of life. It is a small world when you get into the soccer world and you begin to funnel your way up towards the top of that pyramid where both of our sons are.
Yeah.
Because they both compete at the MLS next level, which is the highest level that you can compete at in the United States without being, actually signed to an academy contract. You're bound to run into people, and you see them either at these tournaments that you mentioned, or in this specific case, this was out on the field at Field 8 in Maryland, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
The stadium fields. Yeah, that was a good one.
So location, I mentioned you're out there in the
Yes,
West
I am actually in, as you said I'm in the Bay Area. So I am just a little bit outside of Oakland, California. And I am an unabashed Oakland Roots supporter on the USL side. I am not a San Jose Earthquakes supporter, but that's only because I don't particularly care for the owner of that club. I'm not going to lie. Fisher's a dick. So I'm going to say it right now.
Is that your professional opinion or just personal?
Both.
Okay, there we go.
This is editorial perspective as well. Yes.
Both.
Well, how many the Roots that's kind of that's an older crew. How long roughly have the Roots been in existence?
What's
that?
6th year. This is their 6th year.
6th year. Okay.
So
Well, I mean, the Quakes have been around significantly longer. Did you make the transition? Did the Roots set you free, from your hatred of this MLS oligarchy?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the Quakes have always been one of those. They're a perennial in the Bay Area when it comes to soccer, but the soccer tradition in the Bay Area goes so much deeper than the Quakes. You've got your SFSFL, right? That's the oldest continuous amateur league in the United States. It was founded in 1902. So, I figure if it survived the earthquake, it can survive anything, right? And
it survived Ronald Reagan too.
I mean, Prop 13 didn't kill it. Nothing can kill that league, right? So it's just it's around. No, it's funny. I really got in. I was out of the game for many years. I played as a youth. I played for Mustang Soccer Club. Some people might know that. It's the same club that produced Chris Wondolowski. So he used to play for Mustang. I played for Mustang when I was a very, very young child, and then kind of left the sport for a very, very long time, and then just got back into it as I was in my 30s. Picked up with the seniors league. Seniors league. I mean, to call people above 30 seniors is, well, a bit disingenuous, but
well, I mean, kids today would just say old and fat. You're in the old man league, is what you were in. If
yeah,
you're
and the fat
when,
definition applies too. Yeah, so that's,
when,
perfectly appropriate.
anytime there's an O in front of your league, over 30, over 40, it just gets worse. So don't,
it
is
does.
what
It does. And so and then when that happened, and then I had kids, and so my kids started playing, and my oldest played AYSO. And so when you're with AYSO, you sort of become a part of that whole volunteer thing. I became a referee, and I still referee. In fact, I do officiate at that MLS next level, and I've been doing it for many, many years. I do travel to officiate games, so that's it. Just it suddenly re-enters the bloodstream, right? It's I don't want to liken it to going back to the heroin after many, many years of not doing it, but it becomes a bit of an addiction, and so
yeah.
that's where I'm at.
So let's make the connection then, because you're out in the Bay, Gary. You were down in Austin, but you guys had a previous life together in which you were introduced to one another through a different medium. Probably, I'm going to assume, and I'm going to ask you, where, when, and where did soccer come into the equation? I'm assuming probably from a social/cultural standpoint. But give us a quick background on that connectivity through the industry, walking us into the kind of the early iteration of what Hooligan might have been, on a bar napkin, walking into what it is now. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, so the Hooligan and I have worked together in a previous life. We worked in sort of traditional, in a streaming media service in the Bay Area. It's definitely not traditional. It was way out there. It was way out there. Yes, it was basically the high level. It was an anime streaming service called Crunchyroll. I don't know if you're familiar. We worked in different sections, and we sort of connected. Our teams never really worked together directly, well, sort of indirectly, but it was our love of soccer that we sort of sit and chew the fat and sort of get to know each other. So that's kind of where we met each other, and that would have been like 2016, 2017. So that was many number of years ago, which is coming up for a decade if you think about it. Hooligan. That's interesting.
No, that's a little shocking.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is that anime as a culture is noted for its fandom, right? They call it otaku, and it is very, very similar emotionally, and in many senses, financially to how soccer is run. I mean, the people who love anime love it so much. People who love soccer love it so much. So there's really not much of a disconnect between the two, other than one is an animated medium and one is a sports is a sporting.
But let me ask you guys kind of a techie question as it applies to soccer, because I'm infamous here in our market to poke the bear within our quote fan groups on social media, because I don't know, I get bored, so I look for little fun fights, and I often kind of reference the role that FIFA, EA Sports has played in growing the popularity of the game, in kind of introducing a whole bunch of people that have never put on the boots, and no offense to those people because they do other things, right? But this kind of educational standard or understanding or insight, and, to your point in the word you use, fandom, I see a lot of people openly admit that their introduction to the game was not through a local youth league or a club. It was through a video game. So coming from anime and kind of describing the fandom and kind of the loyalty, because you're kind of in the hot spot right now, timing wise, how do you view the role of EA, FIFA itself, the game, how important is it to the growth of the game here in America?
I think they've just changed, haven't they? FIFA pulled, they fell out with EA, I understand. So it's no longer called FIFA anymore. It's called FC 25, I believe, as well. So that's, they've changed it. Yeah. So it's not, so they've done that. And
I wouldn't know that, because I actually own a pair of Copas.
That's it.
So
some Adidas World Cups, eh?
Yeah.
Right.
But you're so right. It's an on ramp, right? And that's what it is, right? And so if and then there's a network effect that comes into it. So all of a sudden, right, you'll have a couple of kids going to school and say, "Oh my God, I kicked your ass last night while we were playing each other. I was playing as Real Madrid and had Mbappe, and I was Barcelona and had Lamine Yamal." And so it's an on ramp for those guys. And so while they may be sort of in the playgrounds traditionally playing flag football or basketball or baseball or pee-wee football or whatever it is, there's kind of this other, as you say, this subculture that's sort of bubbling away, and it's an on-ramp. So from a growth of the game perspective, it is wonderful. Now the question, how much does that translate from your kid playing in his den, playing sort of FIFA/EA FC25, whatever we're calling it, to actually then putting on a pair of boots and getting out and actually going sticking a ball in the back of the net in the real world? There would be some effect, but I'm sure there are some hardcore FIFA FC25 players who don't play the game.
So I know for a fact a lot of the media, many of the media members / pods, et cetera, within our market, they openly admit that is kind of, the roots to their intro / love. Speak to a second regarding Hooligan Network, and some of the podcasts, because how many podcasts or partners do you guys currently have on the network roughly?
Yeah, so maybe I'll just give you the quick elevator pitch. So the idea, we basically, Hooligan and I launched, and there's a third co-founder as well. We launched Hooligan Sports. It came out of beta in January of this year. So this is like end of month 5. But obviously with a background in media and distribution and monetization, we see, the way I look at it is there's kind of 2 media businesses. There's horizontal media businesses and vertical media businesses, right? So a horizontal media business would have multiple genres, multiple demographics, multiple locations.
Right.
And then there's vertical media businesses, which just pick a vertical or a genre, in our case, soccer, and essentially own that, and you have multiple touch points. So we have a website that obviously takes care of all sort of the articles and the insights. So then we have an editorial tone that the Hooligan is wonderfully sort of running there, and obviously he sort of takes care of all the editorial side. And then there's the distribution and the monetization content. So we have our own podcast, the Hooligan Soccer podcast, which obviously you're aware. Mm-hmm. And then we do a lot of partnerships with bigger media companies, and that's generally how this media world goes. It's a sort of I wouldn't say frenemies. It's just kind of like you work with each other and sort of collaborate with each other. So we managed to get a partnership with Spotify to basically sort of give you guys the ability to sort of monetize on a number of different sort of variables, right? So ads if you want in the audio stuff, or sort of premium video revenue on Spotify, which is a program that they're doing. So we launched a podcast network as well. So so that's one other element. So we've got, I think we're up to about 35 podcasts.
32 on site, and a couple more on the process on the back end.
Yeah, and there's a couple of others. Yeah.
So let me kind of, we'll get more into the details on the rest in a second, but I want to get back to the video gaming and that mindset and that culture. 32 podcasts. I know that the subject matter is all over the board, from fan groups of USL2, all the way down to kind of that level up to Man U and Liverpool, and then you have gambling pods that focus on soccer, global gambling, be it EPL or La Liga or whatever, and then there's obviously kind of human / personal pods like what Soccer Dad Pod is. Within that, the demo has to be, I'm going to assume it's probably significantly lower than my demo, that middle-aged Xer guy who has microphones. Are you seeing kind of a younger imprint through kind of that pop culture element, the video, and I'm going to call it what it is, kind of that gamer culture, gamer style to the pods? Or, as a percentage basis, how do you see this really breaking down between purist news soccer and entertainment soccer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's always been that. If we look at sort of like the timeline of the age groups, right? Obviously, if you look at it sort of like, Gen X, there's always been the Gen Xers as well who have historically done it, and they'll talk about the days of the 90s and sort of, all those kind of things. So there's and they're grandfathered in. Then there's the sort of the millennials coming in, which have grown up in the sort of more TV era and probably sort of caught the tail end of that sort of that FIFA sort of wave. And then absolutely there's a whole new wave, but it's not just the FIFA side of it, it's the YouTubers as well, right? And particularly those sort of cultural ones. So we're speaking with, podcasters and shows that are like, I had a conversation the other day about a kid, he specializes in goalkeeping goalkeeping skills. That's just what it is, goalkeeping skills. And he's got tens of thousands of subscribers on YouTube and followers as well, right? So there is that element. Then, of course, yes, there is the YouTube gamers. There's this whole Twitch culture as well of watching me play. And, you know, and then there's like, if you want to go to that gaming culture, there's the whole managerial thing as well, right? We're speaking with a guy who does career mode in FIFA, and his speciality is just like developing young players in FIFA in a way, which is, but again, there's like interest in it and there's engagement. And when you have that engagement, it's all very powerful.
Well, is it kind of like a, you know, if you zoom out a little bit and you look at kind of the landscape as it pertains to AI or virtual, you know, VR, like Minecraft, and the, you know, when you have these digital concerts that are through headsets, you know, from a soccer perspective, what are you seeing that is in that kind of new tech genre? What are you seeing that's really thriving or working, or is maybe more popular than gambling or whatever it is? Is there a particular, within this vertical, is there a particular subset that you're just like, holy shit, I can't believe this is hot, but this is hot?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. We're looking on the young end. If we look at kind of like the pyramid of the demographics, right? There's a big bulk of sort of the younger ones who are down there. So it's all in that YouTube culture. But I would probably say it's broken up into maybe 3 or different categories in a way. One would obviously be the sort of the FIFA culture, and then within that, there's subcategories, right? Is it just gameplay? Is it competitive play? Is it career mode? Is it how do I go and find young talent and develop them as well, right? Then within that, the next thing would be, as I say, just the actual skill sets and the actual physical in real life of it. And then the other element as well, as you can definitely see, the betting and the gambling is sort of beginning to creep in here as well, particularly on the US side. You know, obviously being English, you know, this as we joke, you know, in England, in every corner, any crossroad, there's 4 things on every corner. There's a pub, a corner shop, a supermarket, and a bookmaker, right? And so it's everywhere. If you look at all the, if you look at all the Premier League teams, and they're all covered with sort of, you know, sort of betting apps, and it's got to the point where they're actually trying to pull it back a little bit. You can see that trend is going to continue to sort of come here as well, particularly as the states continue to get on board and realize that they can tax it and make money from it as well. So those would kind of be the 4 sort of like subcultures of the sort of soccer sort of soccer sort of content creation / engagement that we're sort of, I'm certainly coming across and seeing.
Well, Missouri just passed sports gambling. So for all my soccer listeners out there, if you're looking for sports betting info, Hooligan Network, which brings me to Q here for a second. Your guys' pod, Hooligan, like Cool in the Gang, as I mentioned earlier, and Gary Stryker, you two host this thing. If one were to tune in, how would you describe it for a potential first time listener?
Yeah, I've always gone in with.
Sounds super exciting.
Wow. Yeah, that is, damn. Irreverent, loving, snarky, and erudite, all in the same pool. We are all those things. We love the game. We're not afraid to hate on it because we love it. We'll be raw, unfiltered. We'll call, you know, we will as Gary sometimes likes to say, we'll speak truth to power, right? If we feel that something's not right, we'll call it out.
What's maybe the league focused team genre would you say is kind of the spine of the show? Because obviously we all have kind of an anchor.
Everyone has your vertical. Yeah. I would say it's focusing on the global game, but more targeted towards a US audience, right? I think as the engagement grows as well. So within that, we get to straddle both sides of the Atlantic, right? So there's definitely, the Premier League is obviously sort of a big draw and a sort of attention driver, but then the European competitions, and sometimes it's the other narratives that are going on as well. Like, for example, like, you know, in the Portuguese league, it's, you know, it's getting really close between Napoli and Inter. So we'll be able to bubble that up. And then of course, focusing on obviously the American side of it as well. So the MLS, all the activity that's going on in the USL through the Hooligan and his love of the game and passion. Like, I didn't even know about the Lamar Hunt US Cup until a few months ago, until the first round, till it came out, and now it's amazing. I'm really into it.
Well, you know what city has the city with the most trophies is the 314.
Yeah,
we've got the most. So
well,
go ahead. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, but it's exactly that. So I think there's a world, because it's so fragmented. And again, do you get your news on? Do you get it on X, on Facebook, on Blue Sky, wherever you get your from? And then again, these verticalized podcasts. Is it about gaming? Is it about gambling? Is it about dad bots in soccer on the sidelines in their way? So we think there's an opportunity to kind of like package that up and sort of take the interesting narratives from around the wonderful world of soccer and then bring it. And so we don't want to sort of get into like, well, look at that score yesterday. It's more just picking a couple of interesting games, a couple of interesting narratives. Do you see how terribly LA Galaxy are performing at the moment? What the fuck is going on over there?
Yeah.
And then I think the tone should be is, if we are, I think similar to you in a way, JB, is, our tone has always been, if we were to have a beer at the bar, how we would speak would be very different to how, let's say, the New York Times or the Guardian or the BBC or sort of, CBS Sports or ESPN would write, they'd have a style guide. We're saying array with that and a lot more sort of loose and relaxed. And that's why we have the brand Hooligan Soccer to reflect.
Yeah. I mean, look, to that point, I mean, what we've figured out and what I've figured out with other clients, because obviously I produce other podcasts in different genres, business to politics, et cetera. The reality is, if it feels real, if it feels like a conversation is occurring at the corner of the pub and you can sit there and be part of it or feel engaged, that shit works. If it feels educational, you can see ya, we're done. Like it's not. So yeah, that's just a 2-cent take there. Let me ask you guys this, because you were just talking about things that are popping up in the world of soccer, that are kind of your talking points within an episode. Give me your take right now, and either one of you can go first on this. In the world of soccer, I'm going to split it into two groupings, European and North American. What do you think is the biggest story right now? In let's start across the pond in European soccer right now. That just jumps out to you. Is it Lamine? Is it Tottenham and Man U in 16th and 17th place? Is it is it Pulisic in Italy? What's maybe a storyline that you think is really, really resonating not only here but also overseas? I'll let the British answer that one, and then I'll come domestically.
Well, I think it moves so fast, and it's sort of like the shelf life of it is quite quick. I would say, for example, the biggest exciting story for me is the FA Cup win by the Hooligans team here, Crystal Palace just winning. That is a magical story.
Talking about. And listen to that. That is unscripted brilliance. This is why I love Gailey, because he knows how to put the pin right in the most important part. And it's always about Crystal Palace, so that's good.
Everybody loves an underdog. I mean, it's a seventh tier London squad lifting a cup is amazing.
Yeah, 7th tier.
Wow.
That's
now we're stirring the pot. But no, I'm not gonna.
Hey, look. Let me
with the truth. As far as London let me go, Crystal Palace is certainly not one of the top 4. Well, without a doubt.
I'll fall on the sword right now and just admit my animosities. I miss my oligarch money. I'm going to throw that out there. I mean, I'm all about
greatest owner ever. Yes.
Anyway, I mean, that's really the Crystal story was really great because it was a giant killer. And everybody loves an underdog, especially in that league. I think it's a little bit different. If maybe La Liga would be a little bit of an aha moment, because if anybody wins anything other than really the two, it's like, oh my God, that's a big deal. But in the EPL, I believe, this goes back to some of my own personal player analysis. For example, whenever Pulisic was at Chelsea, I was not happy about that because I knew that as good as he was within our world, he was a mid-tier, lower third player on that roster all day, every day, and I wanted him to play. I think England, that league is hands down, the most difficult league to play in the world, period. Yeah. So if a Crystal comes out and does what they did, that's a big story. Yeah. North America, let's talk about the great 51 states here, Q. What's the story that's resonating with you right now, and why is it Canada being better than America at soccer?
I mean, I think the one thing you have to call out is Club World Cup that is coming to the United States in June. That is the biggest event on the horizon. It might not be on the consciousness of many people right now because it is for lack of a better way to define it, a bit of a shit show, but it will it will creep its way into the consciousness as the time condenses. As Gary says, everything moves really fast, and it's hard to build momentum for future events that don't already have a well-established brand. Like the World Cup itself is still somewhat of a lonely outlier, but there's going to be a big push around it. And once the other leagues in Europe wrap up and people go, okay, what do we have now? Well, you've got your MLS, that's going away because they're going to take a hiatus for 30 days. And so the Club World Cup suddenly becomes really, if you're into the MLS, that's where your outlets. Obviously, the USL continues to perform. But I think it's that upcoming Club World Cup. I mean, we're jumping on board. We are actually devoting a whole pod dedicated just to the Club World Cup that will do daily coverage, daily updates, fan interviews, various things like that. The Club World Cup, a global showdown. So, I mean, come and listen. If you want to get in on it, this is the best place to listen for it.
So let me play devil's advocate for a second, and I want to get you guys' take on this because, Gary, I see you nodding your head in agreement to Club World Cup, and I think that, this might be one of those perfect storms so much that for those of us that are, in the weeds or even close to the lawn for that matter, to soccer, even global soccer, or has a team, there's a lot of people that, clearly have an English team, be it Chelsea or Liverpool, Man U, City, etc. I mean, that just is what it is. Yeah, Crystal Palace. Yeah, all 7 Americans that are Crystal Palace fans. So, but when you look at the groups where you have Botafogo and even a Porto and let's see here, Auckland City. There's a lot of names that are just simply not household names. And here's where I'm going with this. Yes, the big names are in the tournament, but there's a lot of names that nobody knows. And here in America right now, we can have a Copa game or a qualifier or even a friendly with our first team, including, Captain America and Tim Ream and, our best 20 on a roster. And we're putting 15,000 people in a 50,000 seat stadium. So true that up. What is it about the Club World Cup or, that competition that you think is, for whatever reason special and will have some form of magnetism, drawing people to it?
I think that's a really good perspective on it, JB. And look, I think at the moment, the way the US men's national team is at the moment is definitely in a bit of a lull, right? Despite they've never had more players playing in Europe at the big team, at the sort of proverbial big teams, but yet there is not that traditional American enthusiasm behind them. I don't know if it's because obviously Poch has come in and hasn't got off to a good start. Maybe the Gold Cup coming this summer will change that, and maybe they'll be able to turn that around. Again, I think they're playing in the Gold Cup it's not exactly sort of, the highs of sort of, competitive soccer in a way. But I think what will be different this time is because it's at the team level. I think everyone probably feels a little bit more connected to their team. And then also the other thing that I found as well is just generally when the US men's national team are playing, there's a whole bunch of other sports and a bunch of other attention suckers happening around the world, right? In the world of soccer, when it comes to the Club World Cup, there's going to be a lull in terms of the summer because all the major leagues have obviously stopped from the soccer side and the MLS has stopped. So all of these other clubs and fans are not going to have anywhere else to go and not be able to watch any other tournaments at all. So I think there's going to be this engagement. And I will just finish by making this point is I've seen this trend of multiple times, even at World Cups, right? I was in 2010, I went to South Africa for the World Cup. I was also in Qatar in 22 as well. I went out for that. And again, the theme and the trend that always was running up to these, there's a lot of negative press hype. It's going to be crime, there's going to be traffic. What about human rights? And all of these kind of things, which have valid points. But then as soon as the first ball is kicked, all of a sudden the engagement level goes up and everyone gets into it as well. So I think it's actually going to have a real sort of, raising the sort of the tide, as it were. I think that's a big bet for us. And then obviously that leads beautifully into obviously the following summer when you have the World Cup. And I think that's when you get a lot more fans and engagements as well. So that's.
So let me ask a transition question to you, Q, being the domestic representative here. MLS, 2 years ago, roughly 2 years ago now, Apple comes along, cuts that deal, completely changes the distribution model of the league, of the games. Obviously the Messi effect was why that whole deal occurred. Fundamentally, it was a brilliant move from a standpoint of when you think about potential viewers, right? As opposed to a traditional distribution deal through a network or through a pay-per-view service or whatever it is, you kind of are geographically limited, in a lot of cases, comparing it to maybe Major League Baseball, right? Where you have Bally's Midwest for the Cardinals, or you got the New York network, whatever that's called. I forget about WGN for the Cubs, etc. Bringing Apple into the mix for MLS was smart because anybody with an iPhone anywhere in the world can be if you're a fan of Messi, you can literally be in Singapore and dial up the game, right? But we are not seeing kind of that trajectory of growth, of fandom, of viewership in particular. I mean, let's just brass tacks its numbers. The numbers aren't moving in the direction that I think the league would like from a viewership standpoint. Now, on the flip side, the merch and kind of the hard dollar revenue is going through the roof, and we can see that go anywhere in America, right? You walk up to a grade school, you're not going to see the local football team and basketball team and hockey team jerseys anymore. You're going to see Inter Miami. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So let me just get your, maybe a quote soccer doctor's perspective to the slow rise of fandom as it pertains to MLS in particular, and engaging with teams in major markets or just soccer fans in general coming to be a fan of a Miami or New York, etc.
The Messi effect is a double-edged sword, in my opinion. It is a full thing for the sport, for the fans. We saw in San Jose when Inter Miami came for a midweek game against San Jose Earthquakes. They sold out. PayPal Park. People were crazy, and all went to watch them play. But at the same time, as you said, what they had to do to get him there was sort of essentially build a closed ecosystem for the games in order to make enough revenue to pay for them. That's where the danger comes in, because now to watch an MLS game, you've got to pay a monthly fee in order to do it. I don't think that subscription they don't talk about numbers, right? None of that revenue number is publicly available. But I think in private, the rumblings that I've heard is that it's not quite it didn't quite have the effect that they wanted to. But the big question comes in: what happens once Messi leaves? Who's next? Is there another Messi in the wings? Maybe. You've heard the rumors that De Bruyne might be coming to the United States. He's certainly no Messi.
Yeah.
He's damn good, right? And will be a big boost to any club that can manage to sign him. Personally, I hope San Diego does. But we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out and what the long-term effect of Messi coming in. Certainly, for an immediate boost, massive. Put the MLS on the map, gave it a little bit of legitimacy, opened it up, like you said, globally to the world to say this is what's happening. And so next, let's hope that momentum can continue after Messi does leave, because he will leave. He's human. There will be a point where he can't play anymore.
Yeah, on a recent episode, I actually pointed out the fact, because I'm a numbers nerd guy, and I saw an article talking about 50 highest valued teams, yes. from a sticker price, right? If you wanted to go and buy the team, here's the top 50. And I believe the number was something like in one or the other, 19 or 23 of the teams were MLS squads.
Yeah.
In a very low, I was surprised that I think the EPL number was like 12, a significantly lower number. Now, real estate, property value, assets, etc. in Southern California is a lot more than Brighton, excuse me, so there's some reality there, but it's not connecting to legitimacy. legitimacy is the word that I like to use often. As far as where MLS is having a problem, which here's the transition question. And I want to shoot this over to you, Gary, because I think of the EPL 25, 30 years ago in particular, in that kind of late 80s, 90s, the golden era of Fergie and the class of 93 and or 92, whatever year it was. And how when you think of the big teams at that time, they had spines, they had a nucleus, they had a brand that was an English brand. You look at the EPL now, these teams are global brands, huge French contingencies, German, Italian, African. The superstars are literally spin the globe, stick a pin, and you're going to take the best. They're going to go to England. And here's my question to you. You grew up through that. You saw that transition, in a day and an age today in which, quote, national pride is such a hot topic. You saw it happen within the Premier League, within the EPL. Compare and contrast that to what's going on in the MLS, because the MLS is kind of living in almost reverse order. Instead of being grown on the backs of domestic players, it was grown on the back of Beckham. One player, that's it. David Beckham is the one that made this league what it is, right? And the American soccer fandom is trying to figure out, how do we get a piece of the pie, right? Because of all of our kids, like Hugh's kid and my kid, et cetera, we're looking at Pathway, and we see kind of a reverse effect on player origination, right? Speak to that for a second, if you don't mind.
Yeah, wow, you really, this suddenly podcast has become the business of sports all of a sudden as well.
Yeah.
I love this. It's fascinating. Yeah. No, look, I think you're exactly right. And this is something that we've been discussing as well on our show quite a bit as well, which is, I think if the MLS really wants to get competitive, it needs to get out of the mindset of bringing in fading stars and start raising its own stars, right? I think that's the first thing they do. Yes, sure, bringing Messi is wonderful for shirt sales, and you're exactly right. In my kids' school, they've all got Messi shirts. They've all got Miami pink shirts going on as well. How many of them actually watch Messi play? Very little, right? And I think there's also a problem there with Apple. I think the way that they've structured their setup of basically putting a paywall in front of that content, because they put $250 million every year into it for the next 10 years. They're saying we need to recoup that money. But I think what is actually from the MLS's perspective is, I think it's a real bottleneck to growth. If you did that deal with Apple, maybe took a little bit of less money and just said, make it free to anyone who has an iPhone or anything like that, then all of a sudden you suddenly get, boom, massive engagement. But that blocker is a real challenge, I think. So I think probably, and I agree with you in terms of the numbers, I think they're probably going to have to tweak that strategy. In terms of sort of like, what's that pathway? The problem that the MLS has is, if you have one of you, let's just say one of your two kids is a phenom, right? And they come up through one of the local teams. What's going to happen? Where are they going to want to go? As soon as basically the European Cups come knocking as well. And let's just say, anything like even a Borussia Dortmund, I'm not saying a Barcelona, Real Madrid, Manchester City, Chelsea, or whoever the big teams are, they're going to say, yeah, I want to go and do that. Absolutely. I want to go and play there as well. And this is always going to be the problem. And I think it's probably a little bit more than money. It's not just money. I think it's also sort of gravitas and sort of, again, playing in the Champions League and doing these things. Now, my hope and the longer term vision is that a competition like the Club World Cup can try and normalize those playing fields, where all of a sudden you can have a global competition where, an MLS team can go and compete on the same level as a European team and go and actually sort of really fight it out. And we know that they're not always going to dominate. Yes, a majority of the time they will, but I think, that's going to be the sort of, it's going to be a longer burn here, but the MLS has to get out of the habit of basically saying, how do we sell more shirts, to how do we raise our own stars, and then try and keep them in the ecosystem and keep them in the game and give them special designated players. Stop giving the DP slots to sort of, the Thomas Müllers and the Kevin De Bruynes, which are wonderful and great players, but I'd rather go and see a 17-year-old Lamine Yamal American equivalent just ripping up the MLS, and then all of a sudden basically sort of getting paid big bucks here and saying, I'm going to stay here, I'm going to anchor this. That would be the ideal situation. And I think the framework is there, but again, we just need to sort of develop that star. And that probably goes back a little bit to the grassroots side. And this is what I'm experiencing as I say, I'm at a second grade and the kinder level at the moment in terms of the kids and the development, is the cost is insanely prohibitive to sort of bring up young kids as well in the soccer world, right?
It's
insane.
I was waiting for that. I was waiting for that. And he's right. And you're right, Gary. You're right.
And like I look at it and you think of like, again, like my second grader, like he's good, right? He can play. Like I'm not saying he's sort of in an MLS team or anything like that. But for us to just go and play in our local association here as well, I think it's like $350 a month, right? I coach it. Okay, sure, they provide kits and then referees and those things. I get that and I understand it. But then you go and compare that to kids in a favela in Brazil, right? The next Ronaldo or the next, Neymar, whoever's coming up as well. Their parents aren't shelling out $350 a season. And that's just at the peewee level, right? And then once you get up into the sort of serious competitive stuff. And so I think that's something that's probably got to be addressed, and it's going to be hard to, because this is America. Look at the medical system, all these kind of things. It's really hard to break that, right?
Well, that came up the other day. I have a friend that has a son that is kind of entering into that the tipping point of academy capable but happy on small club. And I was making comments, and I was talking to him about it. I'm like, look, you got to look at the soft and hard costs on this whole thing. You really need to factor in travel. Everybody's like, oh, these team fees, blah blah blah. Well, that's not the expense.
No, it's
the
travel.
Expense is 1,000% the travel.
Yeah.
And then he laughed, because talking about team fees, he's like, well, he goes, I have a daughter. She's in dance. I pay 8 times what I pay for soccer for dance.
Wow.
So competitive dance. I don't even. Competitive dance is far worse.
Yeah, all of it. I have a friend whose daughters are in skating, figure skating, and he's like $15,000 a year per kid.
Yeah,
I'm like, for ice skating. I'm like, that's just frozen water. We're not doing anything,
Yeah.
So anyway, I
think Gary's right. There is an issue with the development system inside the United States. At the same time, it is the most popular youth sport in the United States. So we're a little harsh on ourselves sometimes in this country to say that we're not building out the Messis and all this and all that. But let's also be very cognizant of the fact that most of the great Brazilian players don't stay in Brazil either. Right? They leave. They're found, they're developed, but they do end up leaving Brazil, most of them. And the same goes for Argentinian players. And this is a global game now. So
that's kind of where I was going with this as well, because I've heard and seen reports and numbers as applies to an MLS academy. A true MLS academy, an affiliate with the St. Louis City, with the Chicago Fire, et cetera. They all will say roughly the same. The cost to run an academy for roughly 3 or 4 teams that are in your system is anywhere between $2 and $3 million a year.
Yep.
Well, and it's free, quote, free to the families, to the kids, right? Yep. So how do you recoup that? You need a Kevin Sullivan. You need a Benji Cremanci. You need these kids that are coming up, which is kind of that's the weird dichotomy that we're talking about. Gary, you referenced, like, get rid of the bottom of the ninth, superstars that are, mailing it in, coming over here at the end of the career. We need these kids coming up that are going to be the new superstars. But at the same time, these clubs are dropping $1 billion. San Diego's total expense is like $1.2 billion at this point for the team fee, for the build out,
franchise
fee, and that's just not normal. So here's, I want to ask one more business. I like these business questions. Apple's participation in the process, and what made me think of this is you were talking about Apple and how much they're spending. This $250 million a year expense. Immediately, I'm thinking. I mean, we're talking fractions of a percent of their cash value, right? They got $2 trillion in cash sitting in the bank. They can do whatever they want to do. So these are not actually, as much as they're real numbers to humans, it's not a real number to a company like Apple. $250 million, in spite of how big it is. And here's where I'm going with this. It's the pop culture effect of soccer on America, the Ted Lasso effect, the Welcome to Wrexham effect, and to the point where you look at J.J. Watt buying a share in Burnley. You look at Todd Bowley, right, from the Dodgers, who's like, oh, I want to be a part of this game, and he's a billionaire, so he spent $1 billion. He bought it from our oligarch, So there's big money, there's big American pop culture that's getting into it because they're seeing holy shit, this is pretty popular. There's money to be made. God, look at Ryan and old man there at Wrexham, how much their investment is worth now. But here's where I'm going with this. Do you think at some point Apple is just sitting back watching this explosion in popularity, where you have NFL, retired NFL superstars, you've got Major League Baseball billionaire ownership groups that they're all getting into the game? Is Apple poised to really, if they wanted to, they could unleash this for free to all 330 million Americans and say, okay, we want to, maybe they get it, because Apple's a culture company. And that's where I'm going with this. We don't have, we don't have a soccer culture. If you were to define what is American soccer, you would get 1,000 different answers, because
soccer moms and minivans is kind of one.
Probably
one thing, right?
the most predominant. That is likely the most predominant thing culturally.
Mm-hmm.
It's
so from a playing standpoint,
the minivan and the soccer mom. Yeah.
But from a playing standpoint, Gary, maybe toss this to you, because you grew up a lover of the red and white cross there. You guys have you have a style, you have a little bit of a culture. If you being here now, watching enough of our domestic game, what is the soccer culture? What is the style? What is the brand in your opinion, or is there one?
I think it's still defining itself, right? I think it's what you do know is there is engagement, right? And where there is engagement, there is opportunity. You just have to be the power brokers that can be the MLS, Apple TV, even if you sort of, can sort of are the ones who then really sort of determine the sort of the true direction of the compass and the way it's pointing here, right? I agree with you. I think if Apple were, and I'm sure they probably have had those conversations internally and said, look, this, again, from this perspective, this investment of 250 million a year over 10 years is not working. Let's just open this up and just drive engagement. And as long as Apple TV wants to be in the streaming game, they will have a stake in it. The good news is, if this deal doesn't work out for Apple, there are other players in town who will be able to pick this up and sort of provide it to it as well. So I do think it was a misstep by the MLS by not necessarily doing that deal with Apple, but structuring the deal in a way and saying we're going to put a paywall around this. And you can see that they're softening their position. They've started to let more games in front of the paywall and sort of, free views as well. I've noticed on Apple TV as well, where I can start watching a few more games. I have subscribed, obviously, because it's important. But again, where do those kids in the playground who have the Messi shirts? How can they tune in and get it? And they're going to have to go to their parents and say, can I have another subscription for $9.99 a month? And their parents are going to say, well, what about this? I'm also paying all your soccer fees. It gets to a point where there's a strain here always. So make it free. But then again, like to your question about sort of, I remember the launch of the Premier League in the UK, right? This would have been like 93, 94, I think it was. Yeah. And this is when Sky had just come out with Rupert Murdoch. He'd launched Sky on a cable thing. And again, did a similar thing. Put a sort of, put a paywall up on it, and obviously had a subscription package. The difference and the nuance is never mind the time and the sort of technology as well, is it was a bundle. If you buy Sky, you'd buy a bundle. You get Sky Movies, you get Sky One, you get all of these entertainment packages, and Sky Sports would be thrown into that. The difference here is Apple basically have their own standalone product that is not part of a bundle. It's an a la carte individual subscription, of which you also have to subscribe if you don't have an Apple product in a way. So it's just that extra cost and that extra hurdle. And I do feel that, that probably does feel like it is a blocker. And I think you get a lot more engagement, and they may have missed the boat with this Messi vein, because you don't get stars like Messi coming along every couple of years.
Could it be a loyalty test, though? Could it just be kind of like a beta to see the potential engagement, whatever that is? Because, I was just looking up a second ago because I wanted to just refresh my memory. In NBC Peacock, the deal for the Premier League runs through 2028. That was a $2.7 billion deal. Again, I'm going to reference Apple. Apple's the gorilla in the room. If they wanted to buy that too, okay, fine. We've got that in the cup holder. So this Apple deal and MLS could be like, okay, how far can we push people? Because if they wanted to, they could literally create an Apple network of every single league in the world. Right.
Yeah, they could do Apple Sports, right? Yeah, they could do. But again, look at the difference between the NBC deal, the Premier League, and then the MLS deal, right? If I go and subscribe to Peacock, I think Peacock is like $5 a month, and I get a bundle. I get all the other stuff as well, right?
You get more.
I get all the movies. I get
Paramount
the NBC.
Plus is the same way.
They bundle it all together. I'm getting all these different leagues. I'm getting the Champions League. With Apple, it's a standalone thing that I have to. It's just and then plus there's the engagement time. It's, as I say, I think they've missed a trick here, and I think it would be a good decision for the US game and the MLS. is to sort of open this up and make it more free to air, and then just put more ads in it and sort of monetize it. They won't get their money back as much as they probably forecasted, but they're probably not going to get it anyway. So they probably have to change tack. The good news is, and what I'm hopeful for, and what the Hooligan has really got me into, is this USL. I mean, they have a true competitor now, and they're going to have to react to this, because coming in with this promotion relegation system, that's also where it becomes entertainment. And again, because we're watching this now in the MLS, I mean, look, the Galaxy have shit the bed this season, right? They're still yet to win a game in 13, 14 games, however many it is. And nothing's going to happen. There's going to be no penalties. There's nothing to lose for them. They'll just go, well, we'll go again next season and pick it up, right? Whereas now we're looking at, like, in the Premier League, we're coming to it as like, who's going to get the top 5? Who's going to get into this tournament? This stuff, it still matters. And I think that's also as well where the nuance is as well. So I think, again, casting the sort of the aperture out 5-10 years, I think the USLs probably at some point will be bigger than the MLS if they carry on the same trajectories at the moment.
Yeah.
Do you think that's purely based upon kind of organic engagement, kind of a cultural reality or draw? Because I mean, there's no way at this stage, and even if you look out 5, 6, 7 years, there's not the names in the USL orbit that has the kind of money that the MLS ownership groups have. Right?
Yet.
So okay, so let me ask the question then. Do you believe that money potentially comes from abroad? Because if you're an investor and you really, if you're looking for a market that has growth potential, the States has that. Yeah. And there's a certain open door policy, so to speak. Q, what do you think?
You asked about culture, which I found interesting, and for all of the dominance that the Premier League has on eyeballs, on emotion, both in England and abroad, we forget that there are still 9 levels of the pyramid below them. Each team has its own very strong and vibrant fan base and culture. That's the difference, right? If in the United States, you have the MLS. It's closed ecosystem. Can't get in, can't get out. And it's got its academies where people are developed. But the USL is trying to do something that is more akin to the English and the continental European system.
Correct.
And you may look at the numbers. A lot of people will look at the numbers and go, well, the USL is not pulling in as many people as the MLS. Of course they're not. No, they're not yet. But they do pull in consistent crowds that are equal to what the English tiers pulled, and in many cases more, right? Oakland Roots, Sac Republic, they pull in an average of about 11,000 people per game. That is a lot of people. By English soccer standards, that's a League One, that's a standard League One pull, right? That's a small league, that's a small championship poll. That's a very big League Two poll. So the seeds are there. And with the USL, there's a greater geographic, there's a greater regional focus. So you've got teams like in Nebraska, Union Omaha, right? They're pulling about 3,800, 3,900 per game on average, and have been doing so in the 5 years of their existence. This is the type of backbone, the building blocks of a culture, of a soccer culture in the United States that can then sustain itself and become, self-reinforcing. Well, that's at least my hope.
Yeah, let me add to that, and let me get your guys' take on this, because the way I view it is kind of like I compare it to like the Olympic factor. And where I'm going with this is USL. A couple things are going on. Number one, because there's so much more regional. Neighborhoods like Charleston, and Detroit is great. Obviously, you guys there in the Oakland area with that crew, you have this backyard vibe. So, and that creates the opportunity for domestic players to represent in a stadium in front of 5, 6, 7,000, 10, 11,000 players. And like the Olympics, you don't care about 99% of the sports. But if it's an American that is challenging for a medal, you immediately become a fan. I think that you will see the potential of that happening within USL because the domestic route into MLS to be a starter is significantly tougher than USL. That's number one. Number two, USL average pay. That's going up at a faster rate than MLS's rate.
That is correct.
And at the end of the day, how do you get the kids that are on the bubble to decide, like I mentioned the previous episode where I talked to the guys from Indiana. I mean, these guys got degrees. They got MBAs from Kelly and they're working in investment banks and all these other things. They're going to go make way more money in the quote real world than they would have ever made in soccer. But if you can add an extra 2, 3, 4 years to your dream, and instead of it being $16,000 a year and a stipend, you're at $40K, that average pay, you're creating an incentive to keep better players in longer, and they will be domestic. So I think that's an engine that will, once those sparks fire off, you've kind of a combustion engine effect in which it can grow faster. And then you add on top of it pro rel. Because in America, we love nothing more than a 16 seed knocking off a number one.
Absolutely. Better believe it. Yeah. NCAA factor, baby. Yeah. That's, yeah.
So now that we've solved the world of soccer economics in North America, give us a quick pitch, a little bit of a rundown on the network, where to find it, maybe toss out a few podcasts maybe for them to check out. And you don't need to mention Soccer Dad Pod. I already got them on here right now. Give a little bit of a tutorial on where to find it, how to engage it, and what to look for.
Yeah, so we've launched. So we have a main website, obviously, where we sort of put again opinion content, shoulder content as well, which is hooligan-soccer.com. And then within there as well, we have a podcast network. So obviously we have you in there, JB, the Soccer Dad Pod. As I say, we're up to about 30, 35, 36. I'm sort of onboarding at quite a quick clip. But we have sort of really interesting soccer shows. There's like some that come to mind is like the Designated Pundits, this MLS betting soccer podcast. This is a middle school teacher in New Jersey who basically loves the game and basically has this soccer betting podcast for the MLS and does all the money lines. We have the Best Soccer Show. We have the Soccer Shops, two brothers based in Arizona and LA who do sort of more on the global betting game as well. And then you have the more specific fan casts as well. So we have like Raising Anchor is one, right? Rhode Island USL, this guy Matt who runs it. He's just phenomenally passionate about it as well. So it's really fun to see. And then of course there's many others as well that we have in there. So you can go and see them all.
And it's not just based in the United States. We've got multiple pods devoted to some of the English PL Glory Reds for Manchester United, Not That Kind of Gooner for Arsenal. We even have podcasts for the Turkish league, Besiktas, right, with Black Eagles. It's all over the place.
You need another London face in there. This dude, oh my God, Brian or something White, Dorking Wanderers.
Oh, what about Dorking? Yeah,
wow.
Yes.
Dorking.
It's a suburb of London, right? Yeah. I follow those dudes on socials. The team was for sale a couple years ago, and I'm like, I'll Wrexham this shit. I can afford that. A pub team that's going up the ranks, but the name alone, you hit those guys up. Dorking Wanderers, right? I guarantee them. What's that?
Dorking's up in It's Northwest London, right? Yeah. Our scout guy has done some work with Dorking before. We have a long running article on the site by an English scout who gives us like the scoop of what it's like on the ground trying to find these players. It's fascinating.
The only thing awesome. We ask is an official blacklist of anything out of Kansas City. So as long as that's on the table, we here in the Lou will be longtime Hooligan supporters. So I see you guys are nodding your head. I will screenshot this and save that for a future date. Gentlemen, Gary, Q, thank you for your time. Thank you for opening up your morning.
Thanks, JB.
It's great to be here.
Slowing down the workday. We'll do this again. We're gonna roll out of here. Soccer Dad Pod. Like, review, follow, share. Again, that low self-esteem likes a little bit of a bump every now and then. And again, the reviews are highly sought after. I welcome them. Ping us, I'll read them, and we'll go from there. Hooligan Network on board here. We'll catch you guys next time. See ya.
Peace.
Thanks, guys.